I am right now the oldest attender at Manali, which this meeting house is under. Back in the 1860s, this meeting house, the one in Wellsville, and one over here in North Huntington meeting house, were all laid down for lack of members. There had been a number of issues that came up in the Quakers' life. There were a lot of social issues in the country, temperance, women's suffrage, and abolition, of course. And Quakers were more like the rest of the country, they separated. There's also a couple splits in the Quaker faith itself. And I think Quaker, it's a lot less lengthy than religious society of Friends. Sometimes they're called Friends. But they split along the lines that was in this country that between this meeting house and Friends General Conference are known as unprogrammed, which means there is meditation. Quakers believe in divine revelation if they're unprogrammed. And that's what they're looking for when they meditate. Now, Friends United meeting, which is located out in Maryland, they have program meetings, which are very similar to church, regular Protestant churches. They have a minister and songs, readings, sermons. Now, at the time, during the early 1800s, that was a big issue here. And there were, if you went to a church service where there was a hireling is somebody who was paid to do a church service. You could be, I won't say excommunicated, you were just read out of the meeting. Because their opinion was that if you could be paid to do a church service, you could be paid to say anything. And so there were a lot of members left that, particularly, there weren't a lot of Quakers around, so many Quakers were marrying outside of the religion. And when that was done, you were no longer welcome at the meeting. So there was and of course the country was expanding. There was a lot of people going to the west, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, and even California. The further you go west, the more programmed, where they have church services, meetings you'll find. A lot of them in the east, I won't say that it's exclusively programmed, but the other programs are predominant here in the east. Now this meeting house was built in 1811. There is no guarantee that these benches are original for this meeting house. Like I said, there were 3 meeting houses that were laid down, and at times different articles were stored in different meeting houses. The roof here at one time was slate, thank you. But the last time we replaced it, we couldn't afford slate. I believe this may have been the original here, but I can't guarantee that. Now, if you notice on the benches, the hardware, the bolts that hold them together, the nails are all hand forged. They were done by blacksmiths. Now the windows and the shutter, I think were mass produced probably sometime during the 20th century, probably the early 20th century, between 1900 and 1830. As they tried to protect. For many years, these meeting houses were left open, and they were used by local residents if they needed some type of temporary sanctuary, or if there was traveling people coming through, and even sometimes church services of other religions would do so. But they were left open. Then around the 1930s, there became some concern about the safety And actually, there was a caretaker's house built here to look after the building. Now, built out here where the road is, that was property. And then right after World War II, they straightened the road between, and they took out the caretaker's house. So.
When was that again?
Around I think 1947.
Oh, okay.
That's when the deed was. I'm not sure that's when the road was made in 1948.
I see.
But we gave them that land, they paid us some money, and for a number of years, that money was used for the maintenance of this. Now, the hardware on the shutters, I have no explanation why one side was for women, one side was for men during business meetings. When each side would have their own voice. They separated the women from the men, so the women would have a voice. They were concerned if they were mixed with men would drown them out. So they had women's monthly meetings and men's. Now that side, I don't know whether it's men's or women. If you notice where the recording clerk was, there's a desk up there for them to write on. You'll notice they use inkwells. And on one side there are inkwells, and the other side there are inkwells. They're both left and right, so both left and right-handed clerks.
Oh, neat.
So that's kind of unique here. But this one drops, it's pulled down, that one drops down. Now the hardware, again, I believe are original because they're black. The hardware on the doors, interior doors, are blacksmith. And you'll notice some of them are cut metal, steel plate, others are hand forged. And there's a writing block out in front of the meeting house. I'm not sure that's the original location. Maybe when the road was moved, it was moved. It has been there since at least 1991 when I started attending meetings, but it hasn't been hit a couple times, and we've had to restone it, replace.
You said somebody hit it?
Yeah.
A couple times.
Real cars?
Yeah.
They went up the hill or something?
Yeah.
They not too long ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, a car was coming up York Road and was hit by another car coming west on Lewisburg Road. And it just the car just went sailing and hit the mounting block. If he hadn't turned, he would have hit the Meetinghouse.
And hit it with quite a bit of force.
Yeah, because
There were drugs involved.
They were, I was going to say, it must have been.
the rocks were moved, and we had, fortunately, the insurance covered. Now, the members of this meeting originally worshiped in Newberrytown. And there was a meeting house there. It is now located, well, the original meeting house is no longer there. But in 1795, they built a new meeting house. I'm not sure what, is that road called?
It's Old Trail. Old Trail Road.
Yeah.
Yep,
And
Old Trail.
There's still a cemetery there that we maintain. It's under the care of it now. This meeting, that cemetery, and this cemetery are under the care of it now.
That's off to the right.
The cemetery's on the right, the meeting house is on the left, but it's privately owned now as a home.
Somebody thinks the school across the road from the cemetery is the original meeting house. That was not.
I always thought that I was about to ask, okay, where, because I thought that's, okay.
That was Newberrytown one-room schoolhouse, and then it was a beauty parlor, now it's a tattoo shop. Of all things.
And then, so the meeting house is that darker brown house?
Yeah, the stone, there's a cornerstone, you can clearly see it says 1795.
I know where you're.
And then they built onto it through the years to make it a private home. It was owned by the Bus family.
Now, what was occurring was most of the Quakers were moving out of Newberrytown and out here. And there were just too many buildings in there. I say that, I don't know that, but this was more simply located for where the Quakers were. And as you can see, there's Garrison Road, which is a family. But they moved out here in 1811, and this meeting house was built between 1811 and 1813. And Charles is giving me a list of names that are buried, not the location, but the names of people that are buried in the Newberrytown cemetery.
That's why I was here.
Oh, and
I'm sorry.
And where is the list?
It's on, you can find it in, Find a Grave, but it's also listed in the program, the handouts I have.
Here,
Thank you.
it's this
It
page.
doesn't say the location, it just lists the name.
No, I understand.
Georgia.
Because
Yeah, okay.
originally, a lot of this Quaker cemetery, up until probably about 1820, the headstones were simply stones. And maybe they included the initials of the individual there. They didn't want to become too worldly. Now, after that, they accepted names. And now if you go over to Wellsville, the cemetery there, after it was laid down, it became the community cemetery. And all of those obelisks up there are not Quakers. I can assure you that.
Yeah.
It became a community cemetery, and there's all the different religious faiths are represented there.
To be buried in these two, did you have to be Quaker?
Probably at one time,
Okay.
but we've had a couple burials here of non-Quakers.
And are these cemeteries still open for burials in the future?
This one would be, and the one in Newberrytown, I would think that we have no guarantee of where the graves are.
Right.
This one we have a vague idea, and the two recent burials have been in areas which we guessed
Okay.
that there was no.
You're not digging up someone else's
Right.
crypt, sure.
Well, let's hope your guesses are.
This from the existing headstone, because by the time this cemetery was underneath, headstones were becoming,
Simple headstones, simple headstones.
Why are there, in the middle of the cemetery, there's a
Yeah.
fence?
that family,
Who's in there?
the Garrettson family,
Oh, the Garrettson family.
yes.
Okay. They were, I guess, prominent
Yes,
members or,
and they wanted to have some privacy and I guess,
okay,
to make sure that Garrettson was buried in there.
Okay.
And, you know, that's purely speculation on my part.
yeah,
I wouldn't want to say that what the Garrison thought,
Yeah.
but for some reason the Garrison family wanted to. Now you can see these benches are similar but not exactly alike. My friend typically says, well, if you want to come to meeting, you have to bring your own bench. So they made them similar. Now those over there, I don't know, they have no backs.
there's no slouching on these things up there. You sit up straight.
Yeah. How many people, when you have services here, how many people attend?
We've had as many as 12. As I mentioned to someone else, some people will be driving by and they'll see vehicles parked here and say, I've always wanted to see the interior, and they'll come in and we welcome them. So if any of you, we're having a meeting for worship tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And it'll be the last one for this year.
Oh.
We only have it in April through September here because there's no heat and no water.
Can you talk about what people can expect if they show up to a service here?
Yes. Some people are uncomfortable with quiet. This is an unprogrammed meeting. We may begin the meeting with a statement from our faith and practices, and then for the next approximate hour, you will be looking for divine revelation. And if you feel that if something is important that you have received a message, that then you are welcome to share it with the meeting.
Is the Quaker religion a growing religion, or are you seeing the numbers lessen?
I was gonna speak on that.
Oh, please do, yeah.
Yeah, worldwide, I think there might be some growth, but that generally is, the programmed friends who include, evangelical friends, people who feel it's important to go out and find new Quakers and tell people. You can expect that's why part of, it's easier to be growing if you have a culture of, hey, let's bring more people in. Unprogrammed friends don't do a lot of that. We're very quiet. We assume that people will come if they want, and so there are some monthly meetings that are growing, and there are many that are not, and like many other denominations.
Now, Quakers, we have two types of Quakers, or we use them, programmed and unprogrammed.
You had said
And birthright. Birthright and convinced, I'm sorry.
Can you say
So I'm
that
a
again?
convinced Quaker. I was not a border Quaker. We use Donna or Dave. We're both. Most Quaker meetings of this time are convinced.
Convinced.
Right. You are convinced to become a Quaker.
Oh, I see. Okay, and then birthright. Okay, I got you.
And birthright, you're born into it.
At one time they had birthright. And if you were born for Quaker, now, after the age of 16, you're an associate member until the age of 16. At the age of 16, you have to step forward and say, I want to be a Quaker. You have to be convinced.
I see.
Okay.
And what if you don't?
You still can attend.
Oh, okay.
There are people who attend for 30 years and never become, you don't have to become a member.
Okay.
Do Quakers practice baptism?
No,
No.
rights or,
Yeah, our service is like for marriage. We do not have a minister. We have a group of people that have been invited to attend that will witness that along with God.
Yes.
And the husband and wife step forward with their own vows to each other. And then those are printed and are written down, and then the members that attend the marriage ceremony will assign it as witnesses.
Okay.
But no one has the right to give somebody away.
Okay. Because I'm aware, my friends, for instance, a few years ago got married with a Quaker license here in Pennsylvania. So they got married in their, my friend's mother's kitchen, and then they had one of their friends officiate a ceremony for them afterwards.
right, and I believe that Pennsylvania is the only state that has the
Quaker.
Quaker option, which you have to make sure you say it when you first get there, because of the different application process. But it means that it can be the two people deciding to marry and having, I think you have to have 2 witnesses, was it we had to have? Within 3 days. So
okay.
give you a little thinking time. In other states there, I don't know exactly how it's actually done.
Sure.
Because I've only had a Quaker wedding in.
So they still have to go to York County?
Oh, you still have to go to the county.
Do all that?
Yeah.
So Quaker marriages that would be here at a meeting house, they also do the Quaker license then?
Typically.
Okay.
I would say also though, Quakers kind of recognize that it's not necessarily illegal, it's not binding legally, and so you can come and be married, they say, under the care of a meeting, where you have the worship that people come to, and then and you stand and say your vows, and then everybody signs the document. There were Quakers have long. Some Quakers have long felt that that God doesn't make a distinction based on sexual orientation, and people of the same sex can can marry, and of course, for a long time in the U.S., that was not legal anywhere. So there were still weddings, but they were not done legally at that time. But since then, of course, they can do that. And there was something else I was going to say, but it went with me.
When you remember, just say it.
Word it out.
The Quaker, you said a Quaker option?
There's two different versions of marriage license in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And I think it's just because Quakers have long roots in the,
Oh, okay.
When the laws were written,
right,
they recognized that there were many Quakers who were not going to have a hireling
right.
preside over them.
I see. So the clerk of courts will still see, it's still
It's still
a
in the
license,
register, right,
and
it's still in
that's,
the register. and
that
it's still-
person's signature will be on there,
Yep,
and
yep.
get permission from the clerk of courts to marry.
Right, right,
So the distinction being that there's not like a officious.
right, right, there's no official.
That, I think that's
It sounds like, I'm sorry, I forgot your, is it Dema?
Dami.
Dami. Your friends did go ahead later and have an officiant do a wedding, but that's somebody's choice. You won't get read out of meeting at this time for it, but yeah, you can get married without a minister present. Dave and I did not have a minister present.
No, we went to a Quaker family up in Enola, not part of this meeting, but went to a Quaker family in Enola, and they witnessed our sign signature.
I've been studying your website. They have an excellent website that explains a lot of things, you know, and it's very professionally done. So I learned a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and they have videos and stuff on there,
Right.
and
And I have some papers on the big table there that have two really good websites for orienting you to what the religion, who are Quakers and what the religion is about. Less so about the history of, but for, if you're interested.
We have something called Faith and Practice. At one time it was called the Book of Discipline, but I think Quakers thought that was too harsh, so they named it Faith and Practice. And we have in here what are queries. They vary. Each yearly meeting, we are at Baltimore yearly meeting. In Philadelphia, there are several yearly meetings that are out from Friends United meetings. And each of them has their own faith and practice. And this changes, I would say, annually, but there are changes made. This one right here is 2003. I have one over there that's 2013. But at the beginning of this one, there was a Quaker Meetinghouse. At Baldwin, England. And they wrote, "Dearly beloved friends, these things we do not lay upon you as a rule or form to walk by, but that all with the measure of high which is pure and not lofty, may be guided and unto the light, walking and abiding. These things may be fulfilled in the Spirit. For from the letter the letter killeth, but the Spirit lives forever."
Now, do you guys use the Bible
I was going to say, that sounds like a perfect segue to, I was going to say a few words more about the faith practice and some of those things that Barclay spoke about.
Yeah,
Might make more sense.
Donna is the clerk.
Right, and the clerk is the person who kind of oversees it. You can imagine there's not a minister, you might wonder who's in charge, and the idea is kind of that we're all sort of in charge, but there is one person who makes sure we actually do have monthly meetings and comes up with the agenda and kind of helps guide along, and is the person who if somebody tries to contact the meeting, you know, they'll contact the clerk. And so I just took that on a few months ago. There's not, I did take a workshop on it, but there's no formal training. You don't have to go to seminary or anything like that.
No
And-
solemn oath,
What?
no solemn oath.
No solemn oath. I was going to say that maybe not having any particular training helps you feel humbly aware that you need Spirit's help doing it. So that's where I am. There's a couple pieces that are going to touch back to things that Barclay already said, so I apologize. But I wanted to say, so it might be helpful to think about back when Quakers started in the 1700s, in the 17th century in England. There were a lot of people who were not happy with how things were going in the Anglican Church. Same was true with Catholic Church, but they didn't talk about that in England because they weren't Catholic. But so Quakers is one of the groups that kind of formed, and among the things that they said were not, that didn't make sense to them. Somebody had asked about baptism and ceremonies like that, and I think it was the
Communion?
What's it?
Communion?
Communion, yeah, any of the sacraments. They felt were just a bunch of show and not, they didn't find the meaningful. Although I know many people do. But and then the having the hired ministers or in the Church of England, it was usually because of your family that it was like a social class to become the minister of the community, and they thought that was kind of ridiculous too. So that's part of why they don't have ministers. And what they found is that the sitting quietly and waiting for God. I guess if I had to say one thing that makes Quakers different than other religions or other people, it's the idea that everybody can have a connection with God, or sometimes said there's that of God in every person. Some people might not be trying to find it very hard, but there's each person can have a connection. You don't need a ministry. You don't need to go through sacraments. You don't need to give a certain amount of money to the church to connect with God. I also felt that you don't actually, I think the initial Quakers were, they read the Bible a lot. They were felt that, God was speaking. God was continuing to speak and did not stop whenever the canon was established for when the Bible was officially done being collected together. They believed that the Spirit still can speak, and does, when you stop and listen well enough. And it helps if you stop and listen with other people and kind of sometimes we get different pieces of the truth, and it's useful to sit and listen together and see what do other people think about. How does this sound when I say it out loud, which is different than when you hear it in your head, right? So I would say that the unprogrammed Quakers might be a little closer to that initial Quaker practices of very, leaning on the Bible and not so much in the having clergy and having liturgy, because they, as Barclay said, so-called programmed friends often do have things planned for worship, and I would say for unprogrammed friends, there is no plan when you go in and sit down.
No liturgy.
No liturgy. Right, no liturgy, nobody knows that this is the Bible verse I'm going to read. That doesn't mean you can't be inspired to read from the Bible, but that you're not, it's not prepared ahead of time.
No songs, no music?
Typically not. There are many meetings, however, who, say their worship starts at 10, They meet at 9:30 to sing around the piano. I mean, that's just, because people like to sing.
Yeah.
People like to sing. I like to sing. That was one of the hardest parts about becoming Quaker. The whole, probably first year and a half, I'd sit down to worship and I would be like singing all kinds of songs in my head. But
There is a Quaker
Occasionally
band.
during meetings, someone will break out in song.
occasionally, that's what somebody feels moved to that's the ministry that somebody feels called to share is music.
Do you know when the Quaker movement actually started? What year it was?
It was in 1650s. When did
It was, George Fox is the founder of Quakerism. He took a trip up Pendle Hill in the north of England, and he had a vision of a great people to be gathered. And then he went down to the next town and was part of a huge, thousands of people meeting that lasted for 3 hours. And that is, and he'd been doing some of this before that, but that's kind of when the start of Quakerism is
Right,
dated.
that's what they often
And what,
quote as.
1653, I think?
I didn't know if it's 52 or 53, but something like that. 1650 something, early 50.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and like I said, there were other groups that I won't remember the name or much about them, but that also were searching. That was one of the early names before we came up with the Religious Societies, Friends of the Truth, or Quakers. It is said, they often had to go to prison because you were not supposed to do something other than the Church of England. You were supposed to follow the Church of England, and so they got in trouble. You're supposed to pay money to the king and things like that. Sometimes they got in trouble for that. So for not doing that, I should say. So it's said that I guess it was George Fox was at appearing before the magistrate, and somebody said, that you should be doing the right thing, or don't you have any fear about doing the right thing? And he said, well, I don't quake before God or something. So then there's another story that says that when they were worshiping, it was so powerful that they were quaking. So I don't know.
Is that right? Oh, right.
There's two different stories, competing stories, but
Yeah, and
so the name has been adopted and stuck, but it was not given.
I had heard it as a pejorative.
That's
term.
fascinating.
Yeah, it started as a pejorative.
And outsiders observing that they would quake often before speaking. And I've had that experience when I've, you're not supposed to just speak whether you want to, if you just want to. It needs to go through a seasoning process. That quaking was part of what was telling me, no, I needed to stand and speak a message. So that, people saw that and used it as pejorative. And we adopted it just like gay or queer is often used as a pejorative term, and people have adopted that.
I was going to say, I should introduce you. This is my husband, Dave, who is the treasurer at Redlands.
I would say Quakers read the Bible, but I think we predominantly refer to the New Testament.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and as Donna said, you see 12 Quakers, you get 13 opinions.
Right.
There are people that are very Christocentric. There are people that want to have nothing to do with the Bible. But it's thought that the Bible is a sound spiritual document for, especially the New Testament. It is a sound spiritual document and shouldn't be taken.
Given that, do Quakers consider themselves to be Christian or a sect of Christianity, or entirely separate?
I think early Quakers would definitely have said they were Christian. friends would be comfortable with that, and there are a number of unprogrammed friends who would not be comfortable with that. It's, if you're trying to say, you know, are we Christian or Jewish, or, you know, we're more closer to Christian than many other main denominations, but it's not. I was gonna say one more piece about the seeing that of God in each person. As Barclay said, there were two different meanings. It meant that women could be just as easily have God's message, an important message to give from God, as men. This was revolutionary at that time. You know, women just did not speak in public in mixed groups. Didn't. If there was a group of 10 women and 1 man there, a woman wouldn't get up and speak because there's a man. She's not supposed to speak in front of a man. And that was another thing that's that rattled a lot of cages when Quakers paid, you know, if a woman felt she had a message that she was to go to other towns and speak, they would take up a collection of money for her to do that and support her in going to do that. So this was very unusual.
Can you be an agnostic and be a Quaker?
Yes, they call it non-theist.
Okay.
There are non-theist Quakers,
Yeah.
which atheist is not quite the right descriptive term, but you can be agnostic. Some people say they are atheists and consider themselves to be Quakers, but non-theist is probably a better term.
So if everybody else looks at you and thinks that there's the light of God in you, I don't care what you say.
Right.
The Quakers are looking for the light of God in you, and we know that.
I was going to say also, there are a number of people who, this is kind of referring back to your question, there's a number of people who are Buddhist or Jewish, and they find that coming to worship in silence with other people and honoring peace and simple living and, you know, the other pieces that Quakers say are important, they find those things meaningful. So they become part of Quaker meeting also. I don't know that they usually join, but yeah, I guess it depends. You wouldn't, there wouldn't be any reason you couldn't. But so you could consider yourself Buddhist and Quaker.
There is a strong mystical tradition in Catholicism, and I know of at least several people that consider themselves both Roman Catholic and Quaker, and they go to Mass and they come to Quaker meeting. So, you know.
It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, is that you rely a lot on the Spirit. So it is Spirit-led.
On what one individual experiences as the Spirit.
And what God speaks to you.
Right.
Right.
What convinced you to join the Quakers?
That's a good question. I was Presbyterian. I grew up Presbyterian. And then I became really, really Presbyterian when I married somebody who was going to become a minister. And we were married for 6.5 years. And then after we decided it wasn't working well and parted company, I also moved back to Pennsylvania to be closer to my sister. And it didn't seem to matter if I went to, she went to a Brethren church, I went there, I sometimes went to a Presbyterian church. It didn't seem to matter what denomination I went to. I just was not getting much out of the I might say, you know, there's all kinds of things that people collectively recall. And
Do Quakers believe in the afterlife?
it is not officially part of our belief, and I'm sure many do, and I'm sure many don't.
Okay.
How's that for a vague answer?
We are non-creed.
Non-creed, right. A creed is where there's a certain list of beliefs that everybody agrees to. Everybody reads together. Maybe not every week at worship, but periodically. Nicene Creed, Creed of 1690, whatever. The Apostles' Creed is probably one of the easiest. I believe in God the Father Almighty and Maker of heaven and earth, and I don't know, several lines. And people all say it, and they mean that's what we all agree upon. But Quakers don't have a creed, which means some of them might believe some of those things, and some don't. But we believe that God has powerfully connected to each person, whether or not they believe the same thing as me about about some of the things you've asked about afterlife, or I guess getting their voice and becoming part of the suffragist movement, because they had practice speaking in front of people in their women's meetings. And it's not, I want to point out that, as Barclay said, the benches have been rearranged. It's not that the women sat on the benches that didn't have backs. I just want to make that. That's just what happens to be over there now.
And we're not sure that that's the women's side either.
Well, we don't. That's true. We don't know exactly which side is which. Yeah.
Did they sit separately during worship, or just?
Not usually during worship. Usually during business.
There are dividers between the two sides of the meeting house, and typically during worship, dividers were up.
Right.
And during the business meetings, the dividers came down, and when they joined the meeting back together for the conclusion of the business meeting, the dividers went back.
And I guess
In this case,
children
up and down,
probably usually stayed with the women until I don't know at what age the boys started to go over on the men's side.